Okay. Abhinay, is this your first Meshery development call? If it is.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, your audio cut out.
Hello.
Yeah, hi.
Hello, sir.
Hello. Please take a moment to introduce yourself to the community.
Sir, my name is Abhinay Sen, and I am a student from Madan Mohan Malviya Engineering College. And sir, I am working on the MERN stack and Android development. So I am starting contributing on the open source project.
Awesome. Sounds good. Great to have you in the community here. Okay, so I don't see any more newcomers. Let's get started off with the agenda items then. Okay, I think Uzair is yet to join us. So let's start with Ruturaj. Ruturaj, could you just give us a brief about the E2E tests for Istio that you've been working on?
Yeah. Hello, can you hear me?
No, not really.
Oh. Hello.
It's a little bit better. If you can take the mic and sort of shove it down your throat.
Yeah, I don't have a mic. I have to basically put my face into my laptop. So can you hear me now?
It's about the same as it was a second ago. Yeah.
Oh.
But you're audible.
Okay, so let me just quickly explain what are they doing. Oh. Yeah, so I've been working on the end-to-end tests for Istio with the sample app. So this is the PR that I've made, and yeah, just couple changes with the couple extra workflows, and yeah, so they're all passing right now, which is a good thing. And yeah, so basically I used the minimal installation for Istio here because apparently 9 pods is too much for GitHub Actions, and some of the pod or one pod exactly was not getting enough resources to spin up. So the difference between a minimal installation and a full demo installation for Istio is that the two of the pods called Istio ingress and egress do not spawn in minimal install. The minimal install only spawns one pod for Istio, which is the Istio D. Yeah, that's about it. But also, there's another concern that Lee had brought up in the comments that we should probably be using Meshery to deploy the adapters instead of using the Kubernetes manifests in the GitHub Actions that we're doing right now. So yeah, that is another thing to do, which will actually require us to change the workflow across all the adapters, and yeah, and also change the main script for the testing in the Meshery repository. Yeah, that's it. If you could hear.
Yeah. That's good stuff. Sakranda, I wonder if you have any thoughts to offer, or Mario, to the extent that either of the two of you might have looked at that.
I had discussed with Ruturaj we were still figuring out how to replace the manifest with Meshery CTL in the workflows. So we are currently still working on that, but otherwise I think the rest of the stuff is good in that pull request. Apart from that, thank you.
Nice. Yeah, a couple of, educate me if you would, Ruturaj. Yeah, man, I want to say that second U so bad. Ruturaj.
Either way, it's fine.
Sure. I can just imagine in your mind, you're like, Lee, please stop. Just stop, man. It hurts my ears. Sorry.
No, no, no.
Uh, would you kindly repeat a portion of what you were saying with respect to the different deployment styles that we might support for Istio? It sounded like with respect to the use of a profile, that would have an impact on whether or not the test should assert multiple control plane components, Istio control plane components, or just like one or two. I thought I saw the word default in there. Was that for the default profile?
Let me just share it again. So there's a couple of profiles. I didn't quite see all of them, but the two that I'm concerned with are like minimal, and there's another one called demo.
Yeah,
Demo spawns up all the
Demo.
so that spawns up all the pods.
Cool.
And, the default is just the namespace.
If the environment supports it, I highly encourage us to do the demo profile because we're not going to run this thing in production or much longer than 20 minutes or however long it runs. But the point is to just verify functional completeness, or to verify that we're touching as many things as possible, that Meshery is capable of deploying as many things as possible. And so if we do the demo version, we might get Prometheus and Grafana and other things potentially. Or
so that's what I was. That's what I tried in the beginning. I tried it with the demo, but but GitHub Actions just. So I looked at the status of the pod, and it just said that it doesn't have enough CPU to spin up one of the pods. It always fails.
Yeah, I can just imagine some of the other service mesh projects getting a big chuckle out of that because they like to differentiate between how lightweight they are versus how many resources Istio might take. Well, that's a little bit of a conundrum. So for now, the default profile works with an Istio D. Okay, that still is, touches end to end, like can Meshery provision Istio, and it can answer that question. Did you happen to do any research by chance about potential things that we might do differently? Like if we're the type of Kubernetes that we're running, maybe we could run a different one, or lighter weight, or if there were configuration options that afforded to workflows when they run the GitHub runner, like the host environment. I don't know that they really let you, request a larger or more resources, or if maybe, I don't know if we want to go this deep, but it could be that we would spin up a portion of Istio, verify that it was there, turn that part off, turn on the next part, and kind of do that stepwise so that we're staying underneath the limit, so to speak. That might get really hairy. If it does, then, but just sort of a cursory analysis of potential solutions. Another potential possibility is if the Meshery environment the Meshery deployment that you're using, if it is anything more than Meshery server and the Istio adapter in this case, we could not spin up any of the rest. So
maybe. So can we just not spin up, let's say, mesh sync and all those parts?
Potentially, there is that's slightly dangerous. We might be able to, like, all of the rest of the adapters, for sure, you could leave off all the other service mesh adapters. Potentially you could leave off Meshery UI. I don't know that takes much resources. You could potentially leave out the operator and mesh sync and the broker. The reason that I kind of wince at that thought is that, Actually, I think in the assertions that you're doing right now, or that we're doing right now, I don't know that they're accounting for the full round trip that's provided through mesh sync. And that's a little bit unfortunate. Because we would really want for that. Because if Meshery deploys Istio, but we're not verifying that mesh sync actually discovers it and returns that information back, like that's kind of that full round trip, if you will, of provisioning it, then discovering it and sending back the info. Then we're kind of already we're sort of only halfway there in our test case design and our integration tests. Hmm.
So yes, already like we still don't have that assertion right in the test. So might need to add that.
There might be another workaround, might be that there are multiple workflows that initiate, and maybe one is able to call to resources in the other one. Which would require that there's some networking that's opened up somewhere.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that would work.
Yeah, it need to be dynamic. Like there's system. Yeah. Anyway, if you don't mind, if you capture each of those thoughts just as simple little bullet points, so that we can follow up on each one, and just figure out if any of them are easily possible.
Yep. Okay.
We can. Yeah, we can just do a cursory check. That's great. Sounds like we should go forward with merging that. Yeah, Rudraj, the thing that you mentioned about use of Meshery CTL, so we certainly, like Meshery is certainly capable of deploying service meshes, and that's what you're verifying. The issue with how how it's being done is like we're not using ourselves to deploy. Meshery isn't using itself to deploy Istio. And it's like, it's only using the Istio adapter to do it, whereas we could be initiating the request from Meshery CTL to Meshery server to the adapter, and that would be testing 2 more of our components, which would be fantastic.
Yeah.
So there's something that I'm still hoping someone will really wrangle, and it's in the Meshery test plan. There's the spreadsheet, the Meshery test plan. One of the sheets inside that spreadsheet, which I'll try to find, is, well, it talks about all the different tests that are being run and where they are, what coverage we have. So there's a master test strategy, but there's a Meshery test plan. Here's the sheet that we look at in the build and release meeting, which I think we might have this week. And then there's an automated tests sheet down here. I realize this is a little bit small. This sheet talks about what workflows get run where, and when they get triggered, kind of what they pull in, what system is under test, so what area is under test, and oops. This is a good start to what would be a comprehensive picture of what's being tested and where. We're going to find we can deduplicate some things. We're going to find that we can reuse a lot of things. The notion that we would use Meshery CTL to provision Meshery, like we're doing that in other places already. It's not necessarily something you have to write. And so, good, where is that? Well, this is a great place to organize that. I'll put this into the meeting minutes. That's all for me.
Hey, if we
Yeah. So also like us. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so just a small little heads up about the overall sample app test plan is Second right now is working on also the pattern file for Linkerd, and once that's done, I think it's straightforward to have that on Linkerd also, and then we can do the same thing, copy paste for other adapters.
Totally. That's great. Yeah, or even if we can not copy paste, but we can just include, so to speak, that's even better. That's great.
Yeah.
By the way, I would say, Sekranda, if you're working on the pattern file format, talk to Piyush, who also isn't overly familiar with the pattern file format. The reason that you would talk to him is he can tell you about 4 other ways that you can ignore writing out the pattern file format. The point is not to learn that, actually. That's not what you want to learn. So Piyush will hopefully post about that, about how to write designs without knowing the pattern file format.
Okay, thank you, Ruturaj, for sharing. Moving on, we have Nitish. Nitish, would you like to talk about the compose capability that we've been working on?
Yep, sure. I'll just take a moment to verify whether my audio is clear because yeah. Is it fine?
There's some background noise.
Is it any better now?
Not completely. Almost there.
Okay, let me do one thing. Can we shift my topic to the last? I'll just take 10 minutes to research. Probably after that.
Okay, are you saying that we circle back to your topic?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So Bedi, you're up next with the patterns card view.
Yeah, there's not much of an update prior to the last thing. We were checking like if there was an error which Harshit posted that time, like was it replicating in other system also as well, because I was not able to find that bug. So Aditya, like, did you check like if that's happening?
I haven't checked, but if you have your Meshery up, could you just give us like a brief view of how it looks?
Yeah, just a minute.
I think you're on mute.
Yeah, this is how it looks. All the functions and all the buttons that were needed for this individual cards are intact and it's working. We can update file, we can update through the YAML, we can delete it through the same. Only thing that is left is the maximize button and the changing of the page. Yeah, then regarding the changing of the page, I wanted to ask one question, like, do we fetch the patterns in a similar way that we fetch performance profile? Like, we fetch for the profiles, we fetch profiles along with the page number. Do we do the same in the pattern also? I think we do the same, but it's not working similar to performance profile. So I have to look a bit deep in that.
I actually don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that. Yeah, to repeat your question, I think it was, do we have a count of the number of, do you have a count of the total number of patterns?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like we are following the same fetching pattern, like for the performance profile as well as the Meshery patterns. And I try to like copy the paging like component from the performance profile itself but it's not working similarly for Meshery pattern. So I think there must be something that performance profile does different than Meshery pattern. So yeah, that's, I have to look into it.
Yeah.
So like if anyone knows like if what is different by back of the hand now, then it will be helpful. That was what I was asking.
Yeah. There's a difference. The API endpoint for the performance test, for the performance profiles for the performance test, is there's one API that will just give you the total result, which is not a well-formulated API. The other one, this other one about patterns, all of them need to support kind of similar methods about like total count. It is a fairly universal need across them all. If we go look at the reference for either the REST endpoint or the GraphQL endpoint, so we have applications, filters. Here under OM is where we're keeping the patterns, or I'm sorry, I guess not. Actually, this is where we're keeping the components, and then here's the patterns. So page size returns all Meshery patterns. This is confusing to me. Total, okay, that looks like what you might be looking for. I wonder. Yeah, I don't know. Something.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, I'll look into it more.
Okay. All right. Subedi, do you mind sharing your screen one more time to see if we're maybe ready to? Do you consider that UI is ready to incorporate?
Yeah, the only in the UI pad, I think only the maximize button is like that. I've just added the length 100%, which is not required. I think we need that same functionality as we have in table view, like this thing. Yeah, I'm incorporating this kind of thing in the card view also.
Totally. And then it'll be even more confidence inspiring when you, and maybe you do, but when you have it connected to real data. Is this connected to real data?
Yeah, it's connected. Like
Okay.
the pattern is what we have created itself. So
Nice.
like we can edit the pattern also.
Nice. So wait a second. Okay. And then do we have the ability to pop into, yeah, we do, that design button on the front. Yeah. Okay, we'll take you here. All right. Oh, fancy. Okay. Who else has feedback here? What don't you like about this? Yes, you on the call. What don't you like about this? There's white space. It's not getting used. Maybe there should be 3 columns, not 2, if that's what we're going to do. Maybe the modified on should be either should a hug and be a little more friendly with the title, or should disavow itself and like move all the way to the lower left-hand corner.
Just like they created ad thing.
Yeah, but it's sort of otherwise kind of giving the title some personal space, maybe a little too much. It's sort of like not sure if it wants to be friends.
Yeah, I think we have like some other components in mind, like which we will place in the future. So I think that's why we are leaving some space.
It's like when someone uses your own words against you. It's just there's no room. There's no wiggle room. That's right, Subedi. I don't. Maybe we would do well to drop a link for everyone to go look at the Figma designs for the second iteration of what this would be. And that way, even sounds like I should go look at that too, because clearly I've forgotten. Yeah, so there's a seamless transition between grid view and table view is what it looked like. For my part, understanding that there's a second iteration coming forth, one that will require a couple of back-end changes. I suppose, for my part, I don't see any reason not to go forth with, with what you have. But what does anyone else have an opinion? So I'll share this just as a refresher, which is, oh boy, patterns. Which is here. So Alvin Shenendu has helped do some designs. If for all of you that can access Figma, which you all should be able to, there are two drafts of what this grid view would look like. So the first iteration is like this.
Yeah, I think I used the background color for the backside of the card.
The card should flip on click of the card, and it should flip back on click of the card. There's a little bit of bolding that's here. I think you have it. You've got it italicized. I think, yeah. Anyway, a little bit of review just between here would probably be good. So that's the first iteration. The second iteration begins to identify the particular service meshes that the design is compatible with, or maybe the more appropriate thing to say, the way of characterizing it is to identify what types of components are included in the pattern. So because there could be Kubernetes components or Linkerd components or Argo CD components or other. So if you start to think about this in a little more of a generic way or expanded beyond a service mesh, so we can identify the types of components, you can go to details, do the deployment, you have a label of like what, if it falls under a particular category, okay. I think this draft here probably needs some work. Any other feedback? Ultimately, there'll be the need for like identifying the user that created it. Maybe if the user has shared it with if the other team members have access, or if they want to, yeah. One of the numbers that would be nice to show outside of what Subedi had said about like the total count of designs, the total count of patterns, is how many components outside of what type of components are included in a design, how many total components are included in a specific design. Like one design might be quite massive, might describe all kinds of things, whereas another design might be pretty small. Another thing that would be nice to track over time is how many times a particular design has been used, how many times it has been applied, potentially if it's an active use as well. So there'd be a nice linkage between the fact that you have a descriptor, this static configuration, and whether or not there's any actively running infrastructure that's using that configuration.
So also which clusters or context is being used at the moment, right?
Yes. Yeah, good, great point.
And what is a component? Would it be a specific Kubernetes objects or anything?
Yeah, but yes, it's actually yes to both. If you consider that Kubernetes itself has core components that are part of Kubernetes proper, if you will, like a deployment or a pod. And then there are any number of custom resource definitions or custom components, custom objects, like an Istio virtual service. It's a CRD. And there are any number of applications or pieces of infrastructure like a service mesh whose components can be represented. And so, yep, both.
Cool.
Because those custom components that come from a service mesh get represented, they would be represented in the same way that core Istio components would be represented. So
Interesting.
yeah. So there's a couple of things. Like one, for my part, we really have to go clarify the designs and patterns and start to we just need to start to imbue particular properties of what it means to have a pattern versus a design. And let me say it really quickly for everyone to kind of grasp it. And that is that, hey, if you're using Meshery to configure your infrastructure, wonderful. You can do that for Kubernetes components, Kubernetes proper or core components, or custom components like custom resource definitions. And you create designs, configuration designs, or they're called designs. So fine, they're designs. You can use a visual topology mesh map. You can use the designer configurator. You can hand code them, which is what I was saying was intimating to Secrunda that like, no, you shouldn't do. Like, don't hand code them. That's why the design configurator is there. Use the design configurator. It will write out that YAML for you. That's one answer, or use mesh map or whatever. Yeah, but a pattern is different, and we should go write a blog post on it because I've said it I don't know how many times. And at this point, it's shame on me for not just being able to point people to the FAQ that explains the difference. So yeah. Priya, if you happen to be taking a couple of notes or two, feel free to give me a task on that. Nice. Well, good. So Subedi, like before, I imagine that by this time next week, I imagine by this time tomorrow, your PR will be merged, which is good.
Yeah, it will probably be, yeah.
Yeah.
No promises from him.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Subedi. Okay, let's circle back to Nitish before we move on to the next items.
Yeah, I hope my audio is clear now. Is it?
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so so my topic about, yeah, thanks for opening the PR. So actually, like, yeah, there is a utility called compose, and which actually converts a Docker compose file into a Kubernetes manifest. So essentially, like, there's been I guess like this is public right now. That is like Docker is going to release something called Docker extension, and we are we as a platform, as Meshery, like we're actually going to create an extension for Docker so that like people who are using Docker desktop can actually use Meshery along with it, and then like, yeah, they can have a native experience. So that sort of thing. So as we were working on that, like we realized that if there was a feature in Meshery which could actually allow the users to convert a Docker compose file into Kubernetes manifest, and then like and then leverage the existing functionalities that are present in Meshery and mesh map, it'd be a win-win situation for both Docker and Meshery. So that sort of thing. So as we went as we went on, as we researched on that, and we found that this library called compose, which actually converts Docker Compose file and into a Kubernetes manifest. So which would allow us to do things like display it on mesh map so that the users can visually design their not exactly Docker Compose file, because like obviously like right now the utility does not allow the users to convert a Kubernetes manifest into a Docker Compose file, but then like that's something that we can actually write the logic for and make it possible. But then like as of now, it doesn't actually allow the users to convert a Kubernetes manifest into a Docker Compose file. But then with the amount of features that it supports right now, with this the PR, all it does is that it adds a couple of iterative functions in Meshkit, which allows the users allows us to uh, convert the Docker Compose file into Kubernetes manifest. So yeah, if you're interested, you can actually take a look into this PR. I guess probably Aditya will put a link of that in the chat box. And yeah, there are a couple of caveats to note, such as the compose KOM POC, like that particular library is using Docker slip compose, which is not actively being maintained right now. So there could and there is actually some dependency problems with it right now, and we are actually kind of tackling it somehow. But as it's not that big of a deal right now, we're not actually that much concerned about it. But in the future, we might actually move away from it or look for some alternatives. But right now, yeah, this is what it is, and yeah, you guys can take a look at it, and if you have any comments or anything, just you can put it in Slack or right now. Yeah, I don't know.
All right. Any comments, guys?
And I guess Lee will be talking about the Docker desktop extension, so it might actually make more sense when he does. But yeah.
Cool. If no one has any comments, we'll get to Secunda's topic, and then we'll give kind of a demo of Nitish's work, a fake demo.
Hamza, would you like to share your screen?
Sure, just give me a minute. I hope my screen is visible now, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so there is a link in the meeting minutes about this function that I was working on, the one that we'll use in the Meshery CTL command, but it's inside Meshkit. So I had made it like it will give the user a warning here on line 88. Like we are about line 93. We are going to overwrite your kubeconfig file. Then it will have archived that kubeconfig file somewhere in the TMP directory. So and the other thing is the data that is returned by this function here. I don't know much about Kubernetes, but to me it doesn't seem sufficient. So I'm calling on for anyone with experience in Kubernetes to help me figure out the minimal, like what is needed, because this is what it's going to write. It doesn't seem enough. Like the user section here is empty. Under users there is very minimal data. So I don't know. The thing I thought of was getting a Kubernetes client set, which is available inside Meshkit. Let me see if I can find it. There is a Kubernetes client set inside Meshkit, but then how do we access that in Meshery CTL to get the rest of the data that is needed for the config file? So I'm still kind of puzzled there, although Hussaina has not been feeling well this last week. So she hasn't been so available. That's why I kind of slowed down. But she promised she's getting okay, and this coming week we are going to resume work. But so far, this is where this work is at. So anyone with any comments, advice, so welcome.
Does anyone have access to an EKS cluster?
We were using there is a lab inside a cloud guru that we were using. So we were using that lab for the EKS cluster as a sandbox. But a live EKS cluster, we haven't got any to use.
Of the sandbox cluster that you were using, were you able to successfully connect after after you invoked this?
Yeah, connecting with it, you will invoke this function and it will give you, if you have configured your local setup properly and the identity stuff, it will give you back data, this function. But like I showed you last time, the data it brings back is not okay. It could be enough, but to access the EKS cluster, but to write a kubeconfig, it seems this is all that is returned, the way you see it here, from around line 476. This is under cluster. This is what it returns: certificate authority data and the server. Then under the context, it returns just this part here, where you see it. And it's not really named. It is Amazon resource names that are kind of cryptic to the user. He may not really understand. Even under users, this is all that is returned. Click API version as well. So
it seems like it might be enough. I mean, I get what you're saying. I agree with you. Although I think of what was shown there, that might be enough to connect. One thing that concerns me a little bit is whether or not that YAML will work, because you've got multiple colons in the same line. I don't know if you're going to need to encapsulate that value as a string or not.
Oh, I just copied this from the terminal to here just to demonstrate with colors and all that.
Okay.
But in the config file, of course, we shall have to put some quotations and all of that. Yeah, by the way, very good point, Lee. These are too many columns. Then
it might be
YAML read.
Might if in that Kubernetes sandbox environment, if you're able to take that kube config as a file, if you have an interactive terminal, you could use kubectl with that config and see if you can just run a simple get command, and that would help confirm that you have the other.
It actually works after we have written it.
Right. One thing, just on line 88, it might be the case. Like I think we should have some convention for where it is that Meshery CTL is writing temp files. There should be, if you do a quick search within the code base, there should be an existing spot. And so you ideally want to reuse the same spot, in part because like that while you might have write permission to like the folder structure would need, maybe the folder structure is being created as part of write file. I don't know, but there's just some common hangups that you might bump into.
Write file creates this directory tree up to the file.
Okay. Are we still using log.printf? Is that just a temporary?
No, this is just temporary. This is just a draft.
Okay.
It's temporary.
Gotcha.
I may have to import the logger
Yeah.
into this file, like the official, the one being used in the project, right?
Right. 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 Oh, okay. Is this totally standalone? What you have right now?
Yeah, and the other thing is what it takes in here.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It takes in the cluster name, the region, and the config path, which inside Meshery CTL, they are all the config path comes from the utils.config path, and the cluster name are prompted from the user, the cluster name and the region.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Okay. So you're handwriting out the config file. I got you.
Yeah.
Okay. But you're using the AWS SDK in order to help retrieve the certificate data. But then the rest of the file you're handwriting out. So yeah. So yeah, you probably do have an issue with YAML then. And so yeah, I would highly recommend I would scour the net for utilities that help you write the config, the kube config, because it shouldn't be something we have to kind of hand code.
Yeah. So even if it's another library, in the Kubernetes KH library, the Go KH client, they have a function that can convert this one into bytes that you can into YAML bytes that you can write to the kubeconfig file. But then we had kind of already settled for this write to file with Hussaina, and she wasn't feeling well, so I just kind of tossed it to the side. But it's still on table just in case. It can also come in handy with writing the kubeconfig YAML.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
it may
all
feel
from me.
Nice. Yeah, good. It might feel easier up front just to handwrite it out, but it is in the long run way worse of a path to go. You'll end up with bugs. You have to sustain them. So yeah, whatever utility the Gates client has. It's good. Do other people have feedback here, or questions, comments? This is the first of 2 or 3 SDKs that we want to be using to rewrite, refactor the kube config. So for GKE, for AKS. Hamza, you have your work cut out for you. It'd be good.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I think you're going to get this too. I mean, it's looking good.
Okay, so we have. Lee, should we talk about the SMP dashboard design spec first, and maybe the Docker desktop plus Meshery? We can go on meeting, or do you want to?
Yeah, let's jump to the Docker desktop one if we can.
Okay.
Just because I think Subedi's he's going to send out a request for feedback today. So good. So hey, Nitish was talking earlier about Docker Compose, and we've been working on a bit of an integration of Meshery and Docker Desktop. So Docker let the cat out of the bag recently, so it's okay to talk about this now. At DockerCon, which is in about a month or so, Docker will be announcing a couple of things. One of them is Docker extensions. So if you've been using Docker CLI, which you all have at some point, you may or may not have, most likely not, have noticed that there's a Docker plugin subcommand. This has been here for quite some time. I've had teams in the past write plugins for the Docker CLI. And what is it? Does Kubernetes actually have the? Yeah. So they both borrow from each other pretty heavily. And in this case, kubectl borrowing from Docker. But so kubectl plugin, Docker plugin is a way of bringing forth additional capabilities that aren't core to the projects, but want to give you a Docker-like or a Kubernetes-like experience. And so building off that concept and kind of building off the concept of Docker Hub, that there would be, instead of Docker plugins, there would be Docker extensions. So extensions being within Docker desktop itself, so not the CLI, but inside of Docker itself, you can, you'll be able to go to a marketplace of extensions, of plugins, of extensions, and install them, use them, like this one that we've been working on. So to have Meshery here locally and run Meshery. At the end, there's a guy, William Charles, that just remembered. He just asked a question in Slack, and he should have joined this meeting so he could have gotten his question answered. It'd be good to tell him to do that. So anyway, on the extensions, this is how the Meshery extension is working right now. Right now, it gives you full access to, the extension gives you full access to Meshery running inside of Docker Desktop, which in a lot of respects is like super convenient because, because you don't have to bother with Meshery CTL system start. You just install Meshery now, and then you get access to all the same functionality that Meshery otherwise has. And you get it connected to your local Kubernetes instance or to other Kubernetes instances. Nice, kind of convenient right inside of here. So why Meshery can do this really easily for a couple of reasons. One is because when you deploy Meshery, you get a choice of where to deploy it to. By default, will like sort of suggest that you're using Kubernetes. Things are just a little bit easier inside of, if you're doing everything inside of Kubernetes, that's fine. But initially, Meshery supported and still does support Docker as a platform. And so when you choose to deploy Meshery to your Docker host, Meshery deploys as a Docker Compose app, which is a collection of containers, Meshery server, the adapters. So the extension aims to hopefully continue to give people full access to all of Meshery, but also a couple of convenient operations. One of those is, so there's two, and one of them is being faithfully delivered in terms of the Compose, the ability to import Compose apps and to take your Compose app like this. This is a Compose app. I'm sorry, actually this is a Kubernetes manifest. This was the Meshery Compose app converted now to Kubernetes YAML. So what you would do as a user is come over, import your Compose app, your Compose YAML. So something like in Meshery, if you go to the root directory of Meshery, there's a Docker Compose file. You would take it and import that. Meshery then treats that Docker Compose application as a Meshery application. Meshery applications can be sourced from Kubernetes manifests today. Tomorrow, Docker Compose apps. In the future, Helm charts. And so Meshery's management software that compatibility is a big part of what it does, amalgamating and bringing things together, making them easier to manage under one roof. So that's, applications and kind of part of the vision there is no different in that regard. And so, yeah, so then you can, work on those designs here and deploy your Compose apps. When you deploy the Compose apps, it's a migration. It's a conversion from Docker Compose to Kubernetes. So Meshery converts those Compose apps to Kubernetes apps. The second piece of functionality that's provided directly in the extension is the ability to deploy a service mesh. And as soon as we get the sound effect in there, we'll probably be done. But you can deploy your service mesh here with the check of the button, which, sometimes is like absolutely not what you want. You really want to configure this quite deeply. Or a lot of times it actually is exactly what you want. If you think about it, one of the nice capabilities or capability that I use of Docker Desktop day in and day out is its ability to run Kubernetes. Kubernetes is highly configurable, and yet to a large degree, that doesn't matter for some of my use cases. I just need a checkbox. So we're giving the same checkbox or a similar checkbox. Yep. And so that's what Nitish was talking about earlier. So this is yet to be announced. Go sign up if you want to try it out early, though, and we'll see if we can get it to you. So, good questions, comments? Do people see other use cases that could be done? Would there be something more useful to show here, like without having to go into the full-blown Meshery environment? Would it be nice to like run your most favorite performance test? What, anybody have any thoughts?
The alignment of the browse button is a bit lower than the open Meshery button.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, this whole section here is a little bit taller than these two. The height of the two buttons aren't quite the same. The positioning isn't. Yeah. There's a long list. But in terms of use cases, do you have any other ideas? Things that would be nice to expose right here. Results from the last performance test.
I say keep it simple, but
yeah. It might be something like if you're part of the flow of building your app and then wanting to deploy it on a mesh, like deploying the mesh, good. What about deploying your app on the mesh? This is a start, let you import it. So think about that if you would. Drop in your comments, Slack.
Okay, so we're at the top of the hour. Does anyone have any comments about the Docker Desktop extension? Okay, I guess not. So thanks all for joining. I'll see you guys next week at the same time. Bye, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye. Wow.
yeah.
Well, bye.